It is my great pleasure now to be speaking with one of the wonderful bass voices in recorded history, Samuel Ramey. And as we speak, he is here in San Francisco performing with the San Francisco Opera in a production of Verdi's Simon Boccanegra, part of the Verdi Festival. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. It's
Pleasure to be here.
pleasure
Nice
to
talk
have
to you
you
again.
on the program and hear from the horse's mouth about some of the wonderful recordings that
Well.
you have made. It's kind of hard to know where to begin. You've made so many recordings, but I thought since you were singing the role, or singing in Simon Boccanegra, we could talk about that. You've recorded the aria A te l'estremo addio from the prologue.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, what's happening there, and the character's state of mind?
Well, it's the character's entrance on stage, and his daughter has just died, and also there are political machinations going on, and he's about to, because of this, he's going to have to go into exile. So basically, what he's saying in this aria, he comes out, and the first thing he says, "A te l'estremo addio." He's saying goodbye to his home, really, and asking his departed daughter to pray for him.
You have a new recording out that it has a wonderful title. It's called No Tenors Allowed, and it's a series of duets with you and the baritone Thomas Hampson. How did the idea for this recording come about?
Well, the recording company had been talking to us for a long time about. Actually, at one point there was a talk of us doing a sort of a concert tour of duets and things and together, and then the record company came up with this idea of doing this duet recording, and it was a little bit tough finding repertoire. We had to look, and some of the things are a bit esoteric and not often heard, so it was not easy finding enough repertoire to fill a CD for a baritone and bass. But we managed to find some very interesting pieces, and so we recorded it in Munich one summer. I think the summer of '96, I believe it was.
Oh, it's that old.
It's that old, yeah.
Ah.
It took a long time for it to come out for some reason. But we had a great time doing the recording, and it was Tom's idea, the title. He sort of jokingly said one day, we should call it No Tenors Allowed. And the record company liked the idea, so that's it. Because for a while, because you see the picture on the cover of us both in black suits, we almost called it, we almost took off on Men in Black. The No Tenors Allowed is the one they liked.
Well, from that, we'll continue with Simon Boccanegra, and this is the duet that you sing with the character Simon Boccanegra.
Yes, it immediately follows the aria Il Lacerato Spirito. It's sort of a confrontation. Because Fiesco is a bit upset with Boccanegra, because Boccanegra seduced his daughter some years before, and they were lovers, and they had a daughter, and now the daughter has disappeared, and Fiesco wants to. It would be Fiesco's granddaughter has disappeared, and he wants very badly to see this granddaughter, and so that's what the duet is all about.
One of the roles for which you're most well known, I guess what they're calling signature roles now, is that of Mozart's Don Giovanni. Mm-hmm. I know you've recorded this, I think, maybe several times, or CDs or videotapes and things. Is this a part that you particularly enjoy singing?
Well, I've given it up. I don't sing it anymore. I sang it for a long time. I sang it for about 25 years, and yes, it was. Certainly, it was one of my most favorite parts. I did it for the first time very early in my career at the New York City Opera, and then, of course, later on, culminated in the production in Salzburg with with the recording and a video and everything. So yeah, I had just a great lot of years of performing Don Giovanni.
Mm-hmm. And actually, the excerpt that I wanted to play, the famous catalog aria, which is sung by Leporello.
Yes, well, I've also done Leporello. I've performed Leporello as well on a couple of different occasions.
Did you ever alternate with anybody?
Yes, two different times. In the early '80s, I believe, also at New York City Opera, they mounted a new production for me, and I think, and then in the second season, they brought the production back, and Justino Diaz took over the role of Don Giovanni, and I sang Leporello. And then later, and then in the same time period, for the last couple of performances, we switched. He took over. He took Leporello, and I took Don Giovanni, and then I did that again also at the Met. I don't remember the year. It's about maybe 10 years ago. With a new production of Zeffir, done by Franco Zeffirelli at the Met. I did Don Giovanni in the opening performances, and Ferruccio Furlanetto, who I had also sung it with many times in Salzburg, did Leporello, and then for the last few performances we switched. So it was great fun. Kind of confusing at times, but great fun.
I can imagine, yeah. Does that give you different insight into the two characters, a deeper insight to be able to play both of them back and forth?
Well, yeah, it's kind of I found it kind of interesting. I mean, I found it sort of difficult going to Leporello from Don Giovanni because, it was after having done Don Giovanni so often, it was difficult to sing. I mean, even though you're doing a different part, but it was difficult not to be sort of elegant and everything. As in his Leporello, you're not supposed to be too elegant, except when you're trying to impersonate the Don.
Well, that makes it even more confusing because at one point in the opera they impersonate each other.
Exactly.
So that could be extremely confusing. I see. Well, we're going to listen now to that wonderful aria, the catalog aria. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Set that up.
Well, yeah, sure. This is Don Giovanni and Leporello are off on one of their escapades, and who do they happen to run into? But they see this. Giovanni senses this beautiful lady approaching, and he approaches her, and turns out that this is Donna Elvira, who he's had a fling with, some time before, and she is looking for him, and she finds him. Well, he manages to sneak away and leaves Leporello with Elvira to sort of explain the situation. And so Leporello takes out his catalog and explains to Elvira who Don Giovanni really is, and tells her, lists all of his conquests in all the various countries that he's been across.
You made your debut in the opera Carmen with the New York City Opera, singing the role of Zuniga, captain of the guard. Mm-hmm. And I have heard you tell a wonderful story about that performance. Would you tell it again?
Yeah, well, it wasn't my debut performance, but later in the same season, it was in Washington D.C. We took City Opera, New York City Opera used to go on tour at the end of their spring season in New York. We'd go down to the Kennedy Center for a 2-week run, and so they liked my Zuniga so much in my debut, I guess, in the few performances I did in New York, that they asked me to do the role on tour, and so we were down in Washington performing the Carmen, and during one of the performances, I think during an interval, the maestro took me aside and took me down to his dressing room, and he explained to me. He said, you have a very beautiful lyric bass voice, and he says, you do very well. He says, but in this part you don't always have to sing so loud. You can vary the dynamics a little bit. And he explained to me, and I said, okay. He said, try it in the next act, and I said, okay, I'll try. So I went back to my dressing room, and I was thinking, Zuniga is a small part, and you have to make your points when you can, So I said, I went out in the second act and I sang it the same way I always did, And at the end of the performance, I was standing at the stage door waiting for somebody, and the maestro came through the stage door, and he saw me, and he came over to me and he said, "See?" as if I had done it just right this time.
I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your theory of vocal pedagogy, what sort of training that you had, if you have any pointers for young singers coming along today.
Well, it seems like I've studied voice all my life. I mean, I started taking voice lessons when I was in high school, and of course continued all through college. And my current voice teacher, a man named Armin Boyadjian in New York, is a very well-known teacher in New York. He's known for basses, because he had one of his students was Paul Pliszka, and myself, so he's got all these young basses, that always want to come study with him. But for young singers, I think advice that I've always been given, and what I always tell young singers is just, not to do too much too soon. I think, when singers get started in their career, the hardest thing to do is to say no. If you're offered something that might not be right too soon, it's very difficult for young singers to say no, because, you want to do everything. You want to accept everything that's offered to you. And I'm not saying that I've always said no when I should have, but I think that's always been one of my chief things of advice for young singers.
Another one of the roles for which you are particularly well known is that of Mephistopheles. And I was privileged enough to see, actually several times, that famous production here in San Francisco, where in the prologue you climb out of the depths of hell, being the orchestral pit.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about singing that part.
Well, I mean, it's probably one of my very, very favorite parts. The Mephistopheles and Faust are probably the two parts that I'm probably best known for. I remember going when I first went to New York in the late '60s. I can remember going to see the opera at New York City Opera with the late great Norman Treigle. I mean, I was familiar with the opera before that, because I had, years before, when I first started collecting opera recordings, I had bought this old recording with Cesare Siepi singing the title part, and so, it's just a part that I've known about for so long. And then when I saw that production at City Opera, I thought, oh man, I hope someday, I get to do it. And sure enough, after my third season at City Opera, the first season I did my first really major parts, my first Don Giovanni, my first Mephistopheles and Faust, Henry VIII and Anna Bolena. I can remember Julius Rudel, who was general director at the time, took me aside one day and he told me, well, you've done some really big parts this season and big successes and everything, and we were just wondering if we'd like to bring back the production of Mephistopheles, and we'd like you to do it. Would you be interested? And I said, by all means. So a few years later, I did it there for the first time, and I really been doing it ever since.
Well, so far we've been playing your recordings from dramatic opera, but you're just at home singing bel canto roles as well. I think it's fair to say that because of the exceptional range and flexibility of your voice, many of the Rossini operas which had languished in the netherworld of non-performance have been given revivals during the course of your career. You were the only one who could negotiate the bass roles of these operas. What does the singing of Rossini involve from a technical standpoint?
Well, the flexibility is you have to maintain lightness and flexibility in your voice in order to negotiate all of the fast notes, shall we say. From the early '80s, I started doing lots of Rossini. That's when the Rossini Festival in Pesaro, Italy, started at about that time, and so I sang there for five or six years in a row, doing all the big Rossini bass parts, Mustafa in Italiana, Turco in Italia, Maometto II, Viaggio a Reims, Gazzaladra. So I had a great opportunity to do all these great Rossini bass parts.
Well, it was an opportunity for us to hear these. Many of these hadn't been performed because they didn't have people who could sing them.
Right.
So it was wonderful to have you come along and be able to sing them. We're going to hear now an aria from Rossini's Samuel Ramey. If you tell us a little bit about what's happening in this aria.
Assur has years before conspired with Semiramide to kill her husband, and so then Assur wanted to be made king. Of course, this doesn't happen because Semiramide falls in love with the mezzo Arsace. He suddenly hears voices, and he thinks he sees the ghost of Nino, who's the person who he was killed, and so he has sort of he sort of goes mad for it. It's really a bass mad scene. And so it's basically then he sort of comes to his senses, and then after he comes to his senses, we have a cabaletta, of course.
So all the incredibly florid singing in that is the manifestation of the madness.
Right, yeah, exactly, right.
You have sung not only in many, many opera productions, but you frequently give solo recitals as well. Which do you prefer? Do you have a preference?
Well, I've been doing recitals now for probably, maybe around 15 years. I mean, on a regular basis. It was sort of frightening for me because, I really and still consider myself mainly an opera singer. I'm certainly much more at home on the opera stage than I am on the concert stage. But I started doing recitals, and it's a very frightening thing to do recitals in the beginning, until you relax into it. But now I enjoy doing recitals. I really enjoy the sort of one-on-one relationship with the public that you get during the course of a 2-hour recital. I have a fabulous accompanist, Warren Jones, and he knows the repertoire so well. So we have a great time picking out repertoire for programs, and so. But it's like I said, I can still consider myself primarily an opera singer, but I have come to enjoy doing recitals very much.
Well, we have an example of some of the work that you do in your solo concerts with this wonderful Sony CD, Every Time We Say Goodbye. One of the pieces on here that I particularly like is a wonderful rendition of Barbara Shure on this Shining Night. Is Barbara a composer that you enjoy performing?
Yes, very much. I mean, we picked some for this particular program. We picked some songs that fit me very well, that fit my voice well, and that's the secret, I think, to finding recital programs. You have to find literature that suits you well, and I always incorporate. This CD is all American song composers. And in all my programs, I do about half of the program. I always devote to American composers, and which I feel is important. That we have so many.
One of your recordings that I have always liked particularly is the complete recording of Stravinsky's The Rake's Progress, in which you play the role of the devil, once again, Nick Shadow. And near the end of the opera, there's a wonderful aria, I Rage, I Burn. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, to set the scene, this takes place. Nick Shadow has sort of made this deal with Tom Rakewell. I mean, it's a sort of a modernish setting of the Faust story with Faust bartering, selling his soul in the beginning in exchange for whatever, youth, debauchery, whatever, and so this takes place in the graveyard scene. Nick Shadow has brought Tom Rakewell there because the time is up. It's time for Tom Rakewell to pay up. So what eventually happens is that Nick Shadow sort of decides to play with Tom Rakewell a little bit. And so he says, I won't demand your soul right now. He says, we'll play a little game. We'll have a card game, and we'll barter for your soul. If you win, you're free. Of course, it's fixed. The game is fixed, and so Nick Shadow figures there's no way he's going to lose, but through quirks of fate, Tom Rakewell comes up with he guesses all 3 cards right, and so Nick Shadow loses. And this aria is his reaction to losing, because he has to return to hell without what he came for. So I burn, I freeze.
You have a new CD that, as we speak, hasn't come out yet, but will be out soon, as I understand. A Date with the Devil, most
Yes,
appropriate after the roles that you've sung.
Well, it was an idea. I had about 6 or 7 years ago, I had a contract to do a concert with the St. Luke's Orchestra in New York. And I hadn't decided on repertoire. And so I was talking with one of my agents one day, and we sort of came up with this idea. He came up with the idea. He said, well, why don't you do a program, all the arias from all these devil parts because you do so many of these devil roles. And so I put together a concert incorporating arias from Mephistopheles, from Gounod's Faust, from Meyerbeer's Robert le Diable, from Offenbach's Tales of Hoffmann. Oh my gosh, what else? I guess I guess that's all of them. But anyways, a program, quite a difficult program, because there were, I think there were 14 arias, and so we came up with the title, "A Date with the Devil." So I've toured that concert around a lot, and last summer, just about a year ago, I did a performance of it in Munich with the Munich Philharmonic, and Julius Rudel conducted, and it was recorded live, and so it probably will be coming out sometime this coming fall. I would guess by now. I mean, they won't release it in the summer, I don't think, because it's not a good time to release CDs. But I would imagine in the fall it'll be out.
We will look forward to it indeed. Mr. Samuel Ramey, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us today.
My pleasure. Always nice.